The text came during Thanksgiving dinner, just 7 words. Smile, they're live streaming you right now. My son passed me the gravy. My husband laughed with his dad, but I was frozen. I knew my in-laws didn't like me, but filming me? During dinner? Why? For who? That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just family tension. This was a setup, and it had already begun. Thanksgiving at the Cooper house always looked like a page out of a Southern lifestyle magazine. Wooden dining table set with heirloom china, Judith's signature cranberry tart placed precisely at 12 o'clock, soft jazz humming under the laughter. But this year, the cheer felt thinner, like something rehearsed too many times. My husband Eli carved the turkey like a surgeon, precise, distant. Judith, his mother, smiled too hard, like she'd already rehearsed her lines. And my son Max sat beside me, passing the gravy with those wide, gentle eyes that didn't yet know how to fake anything. I was sipping from a glass of Judith's special recipe cider when I felt my phone buzz softly in my lap. Unknown number. I glanced down discreetly. Smile, they're live streaming you right now. My heart didn't just drop. It hit the floor and kept falling. My spine straightened instinctively, like it was trying to guard my nerves. But my face? It stayed the same. A polite half smile, my counselor smile, the one I used with students in crisis, or clients in my old social work days when they said something that made every cell in my body scream, but I had to stay calm. I looked up from my plate. Eli was laughing, loudly, too loudly, at something his brother had just said. Judith was cutting into her stuffing with far too much force for someone wearing a diamond cross and pearls. The kitchen light flickered for half a second. No one noticed, but I did. That's the thing about trauma. It sharpens you, makes you pay attention to the things others overlook, like a candle holder that hadn't been there last week, a wall outlet with a screw turned slightly askew, a decorative bowl on the shelf that had been repositioned, not much, but just enough for someone trained in patterns to know something was different. I'd spent years helping survivors document abuse. I'd been trained to spot subtle threats in safe places, but I never imagined I'd need to use those instincts here. Not in this house, not at my own table. I swallowed hard, kept eating, kept smiling, but inside everything was screaming. Who sent the message? Why now? And live streaming to whom? Was this a prank? A cruel joke? But then I caught it. Judith's eyes flicked to the hallway and back just for a second. A signal. Eli's brother looked away. My gut twisted. I wasn't paranoid, I was right. They were watching me, testing me, baiting me. And the worst part? My son was sitting right beside me. Max, who had no idea the warmth around us was all a performance. That his mother might be the only one in that room not in on the script. I felt the walls close in, not physically, but emotionally, like everything I'd fought so hard to build, protect, heal from, was now a weapon pointed at me. They wanted a reaction, a raised voice, a slammed fork, something they could point to, twist, record. But I wasn't going to give it to them. No, if they were really recording me, then I'd give them the exact opposite of what they wanted. Composure, grace, stillness. I leaned over, poured Judith more wine, and asked how the church renovations were going. She blinked, hesitated. I smiled wider. They didn't know who they were playing with. This wasn't just dinner. This was the first move in a game I never agreed to play. But now that I was in, I wouldn't just survive it. I'd learn every rule, and I'd rewrite the ending. That night, after the dishes were washed and Judith hugged me like nothing had happened, I went home with a smile glued to my face and a knot in my stomach so tight I could barely breathe. Eli drove like it was any other Thanksgiving. Music on, window cracked, tapping the steering wheel. Max fell asleep in the back seat, his head slumped sideways like only a child's could. Peaceful, weightless. I stared out the window, but my thoughts were still back at that table, back with that message. Smile, they're live streaming you right now. The words played over and over in my head like a broken metronome. I didn't know who sent them, but I knew this wasn't paranoia. This wasn't in my head. Back at home, Eli tucked Max into bed and said he was going to grab a nightcap in the den. I nodded, told him I needed to finish up a few things for school. Another lie, like so many I'd started telling just to breathe. The second I heard the door to the den click shut, I went to the office. Not mine, Eli's. Now here's the thing about trust. It dies quietly. You don't even notice it until your hands are shaking while you type your husband's login password into his computer, hoping you remembered it from years ago. You do. And the screen lights up. At first, everything looks normal. Documents, client folders, a few spreadsheets, vacation pictures. But then I see it. A folder titled FT Eval, tucked into the documents directory, disguised to look like legal prep work. My heart starts pounding so hard I can barely hear anything else. I open it. Inside, folders named by dates, others by room names. Living room 0914, bedroom 1001, max 0924. Each one holds video files, labeled, time-stamped, silent. I click one at random. It's me, sitting on the couch in sweatpants, on a video call with my therapist. I'm saying, sometimes I wonder if I'm the problem, like I'm the one losing my grip. I slam the laptop shut. The world tilts. I stumble back and press my hand over my mouth. They have videos of me, in my own house, in private, speaking freely, crying. I open the laptop again, trembling. Another video, me and Max baking cookies. Harmless, until I notice the angle. The footage comes from inside a hanging light fixture above the island. It's not just that they're recording us, it's where they're recording us from. Every room, every moment, every crack in my armor. This isn't about documenting violence or danger. This is about building a narrative, one where I look unstable, one where I become the problem. Suddenly things click. My missing phone charger, the off-center outlet, the new candle holder at Judith's. They've been collecting this for weeks, maybe months. For what? Court? Custody? To erase me? I look at the files again and something else jumps out. Shorter clips, cut in odd ways. Snippets where my voice is clipped mid-sentence like it's been rearranged. I recognize the clothes I'm wearing, but the order of events is wrong. The context is gone. I look angry in one, erratic in another. But I remember those moments. I was frustrated, yes, but I was venting in a safe space. I was trying to cope. Now they've turned it into evidence. Evidence for what? I hear the creak of the den door, slam the laptop shut again, pull the throw blanket over me and pretend to be reading a parenting blog. Eli walks in with his drink, smiles. You all right? I nod. You've been quiet since dinner. Just tired, I say. And in that moment, I know, if I want to survive this, I have to stop pretending. They're not just watching me. They're preparing to use me against myself. And that means I have to act. Not with panic, not with tears, but with precision. Because whatever game they're playing, I'm in it now. And I'm done being their footage. The Monday after Thanksgiving, everything felt off. Too still, too polite. Eli left early for work, kissing me on the cheek like a man who hadn't helped turn his wife into a surveillance subject. Max was unusually quiet getting ready for school. His usual chatter about dinosaurs and snack trades reduced to a few mumbled okays and a lingering look before stepping out the front door. That look stuck with me all morning. By noon, I couldn't focus on anything. I canceled my afternoon counseling sessions and told the front office I wasn't feeling well. That part was true. I felt sick. Not the kind a nap would cure, but the kind that builds in your chest when you know something is coming, something dark and deliberate. Max came home around 3:30, backpack dragging behind him, shoes untied, head down. I knelt at the door like always and opened my arms. He hugged me, but it felt distracted, like his little mind was somewhere else entirely. How was school, buddy? I asked. He shrugged. Okay. I ruffled his hair, handed him a snack, and set his backpack aside. Later that night, while Max was brushing his teeth, I went to pull out his homework folder. That's when I found it. A note, folded twice, tucked between a spelling worksheet and his crayon drawing of a treehouse. It wasn't in his handwriting. It wasn't signed. But it was unmistakably meant for me. You're being watched. They're coaching him. I stared at the words like they were written in fire. The paper trembled in my hands, not from cold, from rage, from heartbreak. Who wrote this? A teacher? A friend? An ally? Or someone inside the house trying to warn me in secret? I read it again. They're coaching him. Max. My son. The one person I swore to protect above everything. I walked to his room, heart pounding, and sat on the edge of his bed. He was reading one of his favorite books, a worn copy of Charlotte's Web. I took a breath. Hey, Max, I said gently, can I ask you something? He looked up at me with those soft brown eyes. Yeah? Has anyone said anything strange to you lately, like about Mommy, or asked you to say certain things? He paused. His lips pressed together. He looked at the door. That silence was my answer. It's okay, I said softly. You can tell me anything. He swallowed. Grandma said you might forget stuff. That sometimes you don't mean what you say, and that if you go away, it's because you're tired, not bad. I felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. I wanted to scream, cry, throw something, but I couldn't, not in front of him. Instead, I smiled through the ache. That's not true, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere, and I always mean what I say to you, okay? He nodded, but I saw the doubt in his eyes, the quiet fear, like a seed had already been planted. They weren't just trying to discredit me. They were trying to rewrite me in his mind, little by little, whisper by whisper. I hugged him tight that night and stayed in his room until he fell asleep. Then I took the note and drove straight to my lawyer's office. Her name was Valerie Ruiz, former prosecutor. No nonsense. She read the note twice, then looked me dead in the eye. They're building a case. Psychological instability, emotional alienation. They're setting you up to lose custody. I felt like the floor dropped beneath me. Can they do that? I whispered. They can try, but they're sloppy, and you've got more than a few cards to play. She asked me for everything: timestamps, the hidden folders, the audio, even Judith's church schedule. We'll start with a forensic review, she said, and a protective filing, fast. I left her office with shaking hands and a hardening heart. They were using my child, and that's the moment everything inside me shifted. This wasn't about staying calm anymore. This was war. I used to believe that truth had weight, that once you found it, everything got clearer, lighter somehow. But I was wrong, because sometimes the truth doesn't lift you up. It pins you to the floor and dares you to keep breathing. The day after I met with Valerie, she called and told me something strange had come up during the review of the video files. A series of documents and video exports were linked to a name I hadn't seen before: Laurel Hines. It didn't ring any bells, at least not at first. But Valerie said Laurel was listed as a clinical reviewer on several metadata tags attached to the manipulated clips. That's not something an amateur would know how to do. That night I searched Laurel's name on my own. And there she was, Dr. Laurel Hines, PsyD, court-appointed forensic psychologist specializing in family custody evaluations, former consultant to Eli's law firm. Suddenly, the wall I'd been staring at for weeks cracked right down the center. Eli didn't just want me out of the picture. He wanted to build a clinical diagnosis, one signed by a woman who had credentials, connections, and something more dangerous: history. Because buried in a college album tucked deep in my closet was a single photo I had once flipped past without much thought. A picture from Eli's graduation, a group of law students crowded around a keg. And there, on his lap, was Laurel Hines. Not a classmate, not just a colleague, a girlfriend, maybe more. I had met her once, years ago, at a firm holiday party. She smiled, shook my hand, told me I had kind eyes. Now that same woman was quietly authoring evaluations of my mental state based on edited surveillance videos. I felt cold, not scared, cold. This wasn't a smear campaign anymore. It was character assassination by professionals. And I was up against a machine. I showed Valerie the photo, the dates lined up. She nodded slowly. This is conflict of interest, if not outright fraud. You want to confront her? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. A few days later, I found out Judith was hosting a private church fundraiser at the local arts center. Eli would be there. So would most of his legal circle. And, according to the RSVP list Valerie got through a friend, so would Laurel. I went, not to cause a scene, just to look her in the eye. The gallery was all string quartets and white wine, the kind of place where people wear pearls and shake hands like politicians. I found Laurel near the art exhibit on forgiveness. Of course. I walked up, calm as ice. She blinked when she saw me. Madeline, hi, I wasn't expecting... Let's not do the fake surprise, I said, quiet but firm. We both know what you're doing. She gave me that same plastic smile from years ago. I'm just fulfilling a professional obligation. To the man you used to date, or to the family trying to erase me? Her face stiffened. I've seen the files, I continued, the edits, the folder tags with your name. She looked around, made sure no one was too close, then leaned in slightly. You don't know what you're stepping into. I know enough. She paused, then said, cold, clinical, rehearsed. You should be careful. When people start acting irrational, it reinforces the patterns. There it was. The warning disguised as advice. I smiled. Thanks, I'll add that to the transcript. And I walked away. But something in her eyes told me the game had shifted. Not because she was scared, but because now she knew I wouldn't play this quietly anymore. They were watching me? Good. I was watching back. There's a special kind of silence that happens in the moments before everything changes. Not peace, not calm, just silence. The heavy, suspended kind, right before a storm hits the shore. That's what I felt on the night of Judith's charity gala. It was hosted at a downtown hotel ballroom, gold tablecloths, ice sculptures, violinists playing Hallelujah like it was a funeral. Eli was working the room in a navy suit, charm turned on like a faucet. Judith wore cream silk and a pin that read Faith, Family, Freedom. The hypocrisy almost made me laugh. They were there to raise money for a family unity campaign, while secretly working to dismantle mine behind closed doors. What they didn't know was I hadn't come to observe. I came to expose. I had spent the last 2 weeks preparing. I hired a local AV tech under a confidentiality agreement, rented projection equipment. Valerie had pulled footage, restored metadata, and organized it all with timestamps and originals, side by side with the edited versions. No commentary, no narration. Just the truth, raw and surgical. And tonight, they were going to see it. All of it. I waited until the final speaker finished. Judith stepped up to the mic to deliver the closing remarks. She spoke about values, about protecting the innocence of our children, about the dangers of modern decay. Then she smiled toward me, like she'd already won. That's when I stood up. I walked to the tech booth. The room grew still. People shifted in their chairs. "Excuse me," I said, taking the stage, voice steady. "I know tonight was meant to celebrate family, so I thought it was the perfect time to show you what that really looks like behind closed doors." I gave the AV tech a nod. The lights dimmed. The first clip began. On screen, me reading The Velveteen Rabbit to Max in the living room, his head on my shoulder, my voice soft, the kind of moment every parent treasures. Then the screen split. Same timestamp, same scene, but edited. In this version, the audio was altered. My voice cut mid-sentence, warped to sound erratic. A subtitle was added. "Sometimes I feel like disappearing." A lie. A distortion. Gasps filled the room. I heard Judith mutter something. Eli stood, his face flushed. Clip after clip played. One showed me crying at the kitchen table. The edited version made it look like I was screaming. Another showed me telling Max, "We're safe now." But in the manipulated cut, the safe was removed, making it sound like I said, "We're not now." It was surgical, malicious, planned, and then came the final clip. Eli's voice, clear, confident, on a recorded phone call with Laurel. "Once the report lands, we push for full custody. She's emotional, unstable, easy to win if we stay clean on paper. The house is already being handled." Dead silence. Judith dropped her wine glass. It shattered across the marble floor. Eli lunged for the tech booth, but security stepped in. Valerie stood up from the back row, arms crossed, ready with court documents. Then, like the final breath before collapse, Judith screamed, "You twisted witch, you set this up!" But she wasn't yelling at me. She was yelling at her husband, because he stood up next. "I bought the first camera," he admitted, voice low but firm. "But I never agreed to using the boy. I never agreed to turning him into a weapon." That's when the dam broke. Voices rose, people stood, Eli's colleagues whispered, some recorded, others walked out. And me? I stood still. Not triumphant. Not smug. Just done. Done pretending. Done protecting people who sharpened their knives with kindness. The lights came back on. I turned to Judith. Her face was pale. She looked at me like I was a ghost. Eli whispered, "You ruined everything." And I said calmly, "No, I revealed everything. The ruining, that was all you." Then I walked out, alone, free. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car, parked 2 blocks away, and let it all hit me. My hands were still trembling. But my heart? It was steady. Because the lies weren't mine to carry anymore. They belonged to the people who built them. And now, they'd carry them into court. You'd think after something like that, after showing the world who they really were, I'd finally be able to breathe. But trauma doesn't let go that easily. It lingers, like smoke after a fire. And sometimes, just when you think the flames are out, you find a new ember still burning beneath the floorboards. 3 days after the gala, I got a knock at the door, a courier, brown envelope, no return address. Inside was a legal document, a finalized deed transfer for my home. Sold. Signed. To a woman named Laurel Hines, dated 2 days before the gala. I stared at Eli's signature, bold and smug like a signature ever could be. The house, the one I'd raised Max in, the one with his growth chart penciled on the pantry wall, was quietly sold right out from under me. Like I was just a temporary occupant, like I was disposable. I called Valerie immediately. "This is retaliation," she said. "And it's sloppy. He thought he'd get away with it before the storm hit." She filed a fraud motion that afternoon and requested a freeze on the sale. But that wasn't what broke me. What broke me came the next night. Max had fallen asleep on the couch. I was putting away dishes when I noticed a faint blue flicker near the window, not from outside, but inside. It was coming from the lamp in the corner. I walked over slowly, heart pounding. Nestled deep within the metal frame, barely visible unless you were looking for it, was a micro camera. Live. Blinking. Facing the couch, facing Max. Facing me. My knees buckled. I sat on the floor trying not to scream. My house, my room, again. After the court orders. After the evidence. They were still watching us. Still inside. I called the police, again. They came, took the camera, ran the serial. And sure enough, it was registered to a rented apartment under Laurel Hines, paid for by a corporate account connected to Eli's former law partner, Robert Delaney. The case cracked wide open. Search warrants followed. The police raided the apartment the next morning and found even more. Video equipment, printed photos of me and Max, written transcripts, a detailed schedule of our daily habits. It wasn't surveillance. It was obsession. A case file wrapped in a vendetta. Delaney was arrested. So was Laurel. The court added stalking, child endangerment, and violation of a protective order to the existing charges. And Eli? He was indicted as an accomplice. The man who once called me unstable now stood at a podium in cuffs. It made national news, but I didn't watch it. I was busy packing. I sold what I could, donated the rest, and moved Max and me to a quiet cul-de-sac outside Durham. Big trees, old neighbors, no cameras, no whispers, just peace. Max sleeps soundly now, he laughs more, he asks fewer questions, and I finally stop checking the locks every hour. Almost. Because healing isn't linear, it's jagged and slow, like sewing together something that someone else tried to shred. But we're getting there. I started writing it all down, every threat, every manipulation, every camera, not for the world, for Max. So that one day, if someone ever tries to rewrite our story, he'll have the truth in my handwriting. And on the final page, I left him this. We were never weak. We were watched, but we were never powerless. We were targeted, but we were never broken. And now we are free.